Now I want to talk a little bit about determiners. I mentioned those before when we were talking about adjectives. Determiners are a special kind of adjective that tells you how many, how much, which one, or who this noun belongs to. And the important thing to understand about determiners is that there are some cases where you have to have a determiner, and then there's other cases where you don't. And so what I want to show you is when you need a determiner in your sentence. So if you take a sentence like this, after dinner I had cake. That sentence sounds fine. It doesn't have any errors in it. After dinner I had cake. But we could put a determiner into that sentence to modify the word cake. So we could add a word like my to tell us who the cake belongs to. That's an example of a determiner. Or we could add a word like your, which also tells us who it belongs to. We could add a word like some, which tells us how much. Add a word like a lot of, which tells us how much. Or we could add a word like the, which tells us which one. All of those words are fine in front of cake, but you don't need any of them. It's not necessary to the sentence. Now, if we had a sentence like this, that sounds wrong. They bought house. And the reason it sounds wrong is because the word house is a little bit different from the word cake. And the difference is sort of complicated. It has to do with the fact that we treat cake like a substance. We treat it like the way we treat air, or the way we treat water, or the way we treat grass, or the way we treat sand on a beach. We treat it as a substance in the sense that it's kind of a big glob of something. It isn't really broken up into individual parts until you slice it up. So you can have a slice of cake, you can have a glass of water, you can have a jar of sand, but all these substance type words by themselves are what we call non-count nouns because we're not really counting them. They're just kind of a single glob. Whereas house is not a glob. You can't buy some of house or some house. You have to buy a house. And so what we call that is a singular count noun. It can be counted. You can count the number of houses on a street. And a singular count noun must be preceded by a determiner. So you have to put something in front of house. You have to put something like a house. That's a determiner. You could put my house. You could put this house. You could put the house. All of these make the sentence work because you have to have a determiner in front of that singular count noun. Now, I also want to talk about the difference between the word the, which is a determiner, and the word or a, which is also a determiner. Because these two words, this is another mistake people make, is that they sometimes mix up these two words. So they bought a house is a little bit different from saying they bought the house. And the difference is that the second one, the house, is more specific. When you use the, you're telling your reader or the person listening to you that they know which one you're talking about because there's only one. Whereas if you say a house, it could be one of many possible houses. So you use a or an to refer to one of any possible nouns, and you use the to refer to one specific noun. So that brings us to our second index card. So again, if you didn't take notes on this in class, you can take out your index card now. And on the first side of that, you're going to write count nouns at the top. And what you want to make sure is that singular count nouns like house are preceded by the correct determiners. And then you also want to make sure that plural count nouns have the correct ending, which is usually s. Although in the case of a word like children, you don't have an s on the end of that word. But you want to make sure that you have the plural ending. And so if you need to pause the video now, you can do that to finish writing this down. And then you're going to turn the card to the other side. And here's some examples. I bought new car. What word is missing from that? Well, the word that's missing is a. I bought a new car. I finally found right car. What word is missing from that? Well, you could put a, but it doesn't sound right. I finally found a right car. So the determiner that you want to use there is the. And the reason for that is that the right car is a specific car. And so you want to use that specific determiner, the. And finally, here's a sentence. It is one of the best car I've ever owned. Now the problem with this sentence is the word car should actually be plural, even though it sounds like it is one of the best. It sounds like one, right? But it's one of many. I looked at a whole group of cars, and this one is one of that group. And so you actually want an S on the end of that car. So feel free to pause the video if you need to write this down.